With all the buzz dying down about Barbie, I decided that I would revisit the fun. Did you know that Barbie has had over 150 careers since she came out in 1959? She has been an astronaut, a ballerina, a chef, a veterinarian, and even a presidential candidate. But something you won't find at the store when looking at the dolls are the Barbie and Ken Killers edition. Well, that's what I'm here for. So come on in and grab your favorite drink. I'm having a badass Barbie drink with a twist. It's a shot and a half of vodka, ice, strawberries, and the Starbucks pink drink. And we'll discuss this notorious couple in Canada that kidnapped, killed, and documented it all with video. They were known as the Ken and Barbie Killers. Also, I just wanted to say a thank you to my subscribers. I'm somewhat challenging myself because it feels really weird for me to be here recording myself for these. And I appreciate that you were interested enough to subscribe. So I decided that once I get to 100 subscribers, because I like to celebrate the small victories, I'm going to start giving away some gifts like this that I made. So stay tuned and let's make it there. The 80s was a time of really cool toys and so many nostalgic memories for some of us older folks. But the late 80s was also a scary time for many of the residents in Scarborough and Toronto, Canada. Young girls were being abducted and assaulted on the streets that parents previously thought to be safe. The Ken and Barbie Killers got their name because of their clean-cut, picturesque looks, but their real names were Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka. I heard about this story and had to go searching to learn a little more about what kind of life these killers had before they met. Well, Paul was born into a family as the youngest of three. His grandfather was a prominent lawyer and demanded that his daughter marry a man with an education and a career. She loved a man, but he didn't reach her father's standards. Instead, she met and married an accountant that looked better on paper. Problem is, he was abusive to her and her children. She was depressed and unhappy and ran back to her initial lover's arms for comfort and became pregnant with Paul. Her husband accepted the pregnancy and gave Paul his last name. Now, not only was Mr. Bernardo physically abusive to his wife, he was also sexually abusive towards his own daughter. He was also charged with molestation of a child and peeping into ladies' windows at night. He was a real creep. Now, while this severely affected his daughter and his son, Paul seemed unbothered at the surface. Everyone viewed him as this charming, sweet kid. And when Paul was 16, he and his mother got into a heated argument, and she showed him who his real father was. The boy was shook. He had been lied to his whole life. He then started treating his mother horribly, calling her a whore and a slob, and now he had a hatred grow for both parents, and he started hanging around with some of the street kids. He and one of his friends were recruited to work for Amway. So while working at Scam Central, he would use everything he learned and practiced for those sales tactics on young women at the bars. And being able to charm them became a game for him. Well, when he was 23, he met a 17-year-old by the name of Karla Homolka. She was with some of her work colleagues at an animal care conference when she snuck to the bar in the middle of the night and was charmed by Paul Bernardo. They began a long-distance relationship as Paul lived in Scarborough and Karla in St. Catherine. She was head over heels with Paul, and he would come visit her in St. Catharines. Her family loved him because he was a little older and he seemed to be on the path of success. Well, like Paul, Catherine grew up witnessing her father get drunk and beat on her mother. You know, some people can't hold their liquor. Karla was known for being very bossy, aggressive, and very open with experimenting with drugs and fetishes as a teen. She found early in her relationship that she and Paul shared the same fantasies and sexual interests. Well, these sadistic interests were only fantasies for Karla. For Paul, they were a reality. 5 months before he met Karla, Paul attacked a young woman that was 21. She was walking to her parents' home from the bus, and he followed her, attacked and violated her right in her own yard. 10 days later, he would attack another a 19-year-old girl in her own backyard. It was quiet for a couple months, and then in July, he attacked a third lady. But that one would end up fighting back. And although she ended up battered and abused, he didn't carry out his initial intentions. So he abandoned the attack. He laid low for a little while as he and Karla got closer. But in December, he would attack a 15-year-old girl. And after this attack, Toronto police alerted the public. They warned young women to be alert when traveling in the evening, especially those that traveled by bus. A week later, during the holiday season, he attacked a 17-year-old, but now he's begun using a knife to threaten, and the violence escalated. The news began referring to him as the Scarborough Rapist. In 1988, he would continue to attack girls. A couple got away, but others wouldn't. He even had a couple close calls when investigators were staking out the bus station, and he was being a lurker, and he was chased down by them. And another time, a neighbor came out and stopped an attempted attack on a 15-year-old girl. By the end of the year, Metro Police formed a special task force dedicated to catching the Scarborough Rapists. These attacks would continue all through 1989 and into 1990. He attacked at least 15 women in Scarborough when he wasn't spending time with his girlfriend, Karla. The 13th was able to get a good look at him, and a composite photo was made and circulated. Because Karla's family liked Bernardo, they blindly trusted him. See, although he was dating Karla, Bernardo was infatuated with her 15-year-old baby sister, the sister he met when she was just 12. Karla knew about his twisted obsession with her sister, and while most other girls probably would have been upset and left him, she fed his sick hunger. She would take Paul to Tammy's room while her parents were sleeping, and he would pleasure himself as he watched her sleep. Karla even went as far as to break Tammy's blinds in her bedroom so that Paul could watch in the window. In July 1990, the two fed Tammy a Valium-laced spaghetti dish, and Bernardo would begin to violate Tammy for about a minute before she began to wake up, so he aborted his plans. Well, 6 months before they would get married, Karla wanted to give her sister's virginity to Paul as a Christmas gift. How generous, right? Karla and Paul laced Tammy's eggnog with sleeping pills. Her parents were okay with her having a couple of festive drinks as long as she didn't go overboard. The rest of the family went to bed. So that's Karla's parents and her middle sister, Lori. Now that her baby sister Tammy was asleep, they couldn't risk the chance of her waking up again before Paul got what he wanted from her, because that's what happened during his last attempt. As part of her so-called gift, Karla obtained some halothane from the animal clinic that she worked at. The animal clinic uses this as an anesthetic because of the inhalation of the vapors will depress the central nervous system. Now remember, these are young adults playing with dangerous chemicals. They would cover Tammy's mouth with this, and then Karla sexually violated her own sister first, and then allowed Paul to do so. Tammy began vomiting and became unresponsive. The couple would quickly dress her and then themselves and then call 911. Tammy's cause of death would be determined as asphyxiation on her own vomit. Motivated by their desire for sexual gratification, the couple continued their spree by targeting innocent young girls. Karla was obsessed with Paul's happiness. It was like she felt he was out of her league, and she would do anything to hold on to him and not allow him to get bored. Paul blamed Karla for Tammy's death because she went overboard on the halothane. So she searched for a replacement for her sister, and she did have a friend referred to as Jane Doe that looked similar to Karla's baby sister Tammy. And Karla thought this would be the perfect replacement. Jane Doe looked up to Karla as she was older, sophisticated, and, she was living the life. Karla invited Jane Doe over into the dangerous spiderweb they called home. They had dinner, they talked, they had some sweet alcoholic drinks that Karla was serving that did not stop flowing. Jane fell asleep deeply. Well, not really slept. She was knocked out. Karla had added sleeping pills to her drinks, just like she did with Tammy, and used the halothane that she got from the clinic. She just knew to be a little more cautious with it this time. The couple again did some unimaginable things to Jane, and she would wake up sick and sore, but she chalked it up to the drinking that they did. She thought that when she had met Paul in the morning, that was her first time meeting him, never imagining what he and her friend had done to her that night before. On June 29 of 1991, just 6 months after the death of her sister, Karla and Paul got married. They had a huge, lavish storybook wedding, complete with horse and carriage. Then, on that very same day, about a half an hour away, another couple was fishing in Lake Gibson, and they found some concrete slabs in the shallow lake. After a little poking and prodding with the oar, they discovered something horrifying that was in these slabs. Police were called, and the slabs were recovered, and in these slabs were pieces of a 14-year-old girl by the name of Leslie Mahaffey. 2 weeks earlier, Leslie had gone to a wake for one of her friends that had perished in a car accident with 3 others. And when she returned home past curfew, the doors were locked. See, her mother was trying to show her tough love because, as many teens, Leslie was testing boundaries. She was getting into trouble and staying out past curfew. So she walked over to a payphone and she called a friend to ask if she could sleep at her house. But the mother of that friend said no. Once Leslie didn't make it to the funeral the next day, her mother contacted police to report her missing. Once he confessed, Paul Bernardo said that he saw her alone and offered her a cigarette. Once she walked with him back to the car to fetch the cigarette, he wrapped his sweatshirt around her head and forced her into the vehicle. Bernardo would keep Leslie as a prisoner in the home that he shared with Karla. The two of them would take turns violating Leslie. Paul would direct Karla on what to do while he recorded it, and then Karla would record, and Paul violently violated, assaulted, and sodomized her. Over 24 hours later, after all the torture, Leslie was strangled to death. But there are conflicting stories between Homolka and Bernardo on which one of them actually killed her. Leslie was killed over Father's Day weekend, and the couple was hosting a dinner at their house. So they moved the body to the basement, and they acted like everything was normal. They even blocked Karla's mom from when she attempted to go down there. Once the dinner was over, the couple used a circular saw belonging to Homolka's grandfather to dismember the young girl. Then they put the pieces into these concrete slabs. They tried to make them light enough for them to carry. Almost a year passes by, and on April 16th, 1991, a 15-year-old girl by the name of Kristen French was walking home from school when the couple approached the entrance of the parking lot of her school and asked for directions. While French talked to Homolka to try to explain the directions, Bernardo came from behind her and forced her into the car at knife point. That's so heartbreaking to me because I look back and think, how many times has someone stopped me to ask for directions? Keep your eyes peeled, people. Check your surroundings. Now, these two were getting bold because this is daytime at the school parking lot, dismissal time. This kidnapping was seen by several eyewitnesses. Kristen was held in captivity for 3 days, and Bernardo and Homolka recorded themselves torturing, degrading, and sexually humiliating her. They also continuously forced her to drink alcohol, and looking at their patterns, these drinks were probably laced with pills to subdue her. The couple killed her on the 19th and dumped her body in a ditch along a side road. But her body wasn't found until 11 days later. There were other girls that went missing in the neighborhood between these time periods, but there was no proof of the couple's involvement. Now, remember that composite drawing that Paul's 13th victim helped create? Let's get back to that composite drawing. Police got a few leads for Paul Bernardo on their drawings for the Scarborough rapists. They got calls stating not only does Paul resemble the drawing, But Paul is bossy and demanding and often made people feel uncomfortable with the way that he treated those around him. Police went to interview him in November of 1990. That's a month before Homolka's sister died. But Paul was charming. He was very cooperative with the police and even went so far to agree that the drawing does resemble him and he understands where detectives are coming from. So Paul, being the great member of society he pretended to be, he voluntarily gave police his DNA. He gave them samples of blood, hair, and saliva. Problem is, since it was still early in the DNA analysis days, this was when DNA was gaining notoriety. DNA analysis was assigned to just one person, so it took over 2 years to get results back. Now Bernardo's hunger for violence was getting greater and he began physically abusing his wife, Karla Homolka. Apparently that's where Karla draws the line. It was okay to abuse others, but not her. So she was over being submissive to him now. And in January of 1993, after Bernardo beat Homolka with a flashlight, she went with her black eyes to the police to file charges against him and told police that she had all the information they needed to find the man they've been looking for. She cut a deal with them in exchange for this information. She told them all about the videotapes he had and how he recorded the attacks and said that she was forced to participate in the acts. In February 2023, the police took the information that Homolka gave them and the DNA results that finally came back, connecting Bernardo to the victims of the Scarborough rapists, and he was arrested. They obtained a search warrant and searched the home for 10 weeks.
We were given some assistance from Karla as to where to look for physical evidence in the interior of the house.
They have Karla do a walkthrough with them, which is an extraordinary video to watch.
God, it feels weird to be back in here.
Frankly, it's mind-boggling. Karla deliberately dresses up like a schoolgirl as if to say to the police, hey, I'm just another victim too, like these poor schoolgirls, Leslie and Kristen.
Can you answer a question for me? Was any of the furniture damaged as a result of the investigation?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
It's astonishing that a woman who's walking through a house where people have been killed and sexually assaulted still has the audacity to ask where her furniture is.
The extraordinary detachment that Homolka showed around all of this stuff, there was a real element of banality of evil with her.
Can I ask you a question?
I'm afraid I can't.
Can I have that book? My sister wants it. Or does that have to stay?
That has to stay for now, but we can make those arrangements.
Okay, thanks. I'm not this is great.
She couldn't even find her way to the place where you pretend empathy properly. Couldn't get there.
The more she has police and psychiatrists and therapists not knowing what's on the tapes, saying, oh my God, look what you've been through. Her family is believing that she's been beaten time and time again by Bernardo. She's reading all this literature about battered women. And Karla starts to become a creature of all that information. She takes it in and in her chameleon-like way begins to view herself as a victim, as the battered woman.
While the prosecution continues to question Karla, Paul Bernardo's lawyers are still holding on to the tapes that completely shatter the illusion that Karla's an unwilling victim. Yet the Crown don't know that. And they never found the videotapes, which were in some light fixture. Their entire prosecution against Bernardo revolves around her testimony. And so they needed to play nice with Karla, because she was the only information source they had. And so they end up making a plea bargain deal with her behind closed doors.
It will become one of the most controversial plea agreements in Canadian history, known as a deal with the devil.
After 71 days of tearing apart the rooms, they could not find the incriminating tapes. Law enforcement agencies were under immense pressure to apprehend these tapes. The only tapes they found were home videos, holidays, not proof of criminal activity from Paul. Once police left, Paul called his lawyer, Ken Murray, and told him exactly where the tapes were hidden. He went in the bathroom, removed the light fixture, stretched enough to get in the ceiling to find them. His lawyer grabbed them and tucked them away for a year. His plan was to show the tapes to prove that Karla was not just an innocent victim, she was a partner. She was excited and leading some of these assaults. She basically played the police because they needed her, and never seeing the tapes, they offered her a plea deal. Now, the Bernardo case became one of the most prolific criminal investigations in Canadian history. Finally, on February 17, 1993, Paul Bernardo was arrested and charged with numerous offenses, including the murders of Mahaffey and French. The subsequent trial, which began on May 18, 1995, captivated the nation. During the trial, harrowing details were revealed about the extent of Bernardo and Homolka's sadistic acts. The evidence presented against Bernardo was overwhelming, including DNA evidence, video recordings of the crimes, and testimonies from victims and witnesses. On September 1st, 1995, after a lengthy trial, Paul Bernardo was convicted on multiple accounts, including 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault, and 1 count of manslaughter. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Karla Homolka, on the other hand, struck a controversial plea deal with the prosecution. In exchange for her testimony against Bernardo, she received a reduced sentence of 12 years for manslaughter, 5 years for Kristen French, 5 for Leslie Mahaffey, and 2 for Tammy Homolka. This decision sparked outrage and public outcry, as many believed her involvement in the crimes justified a much harder punishment. The Paul Bernardo trial not only revealed the depths of human depravity, but also highlighted the flaws in the legal system. It sparked debates surrounding plea bargains, sentencing, and ensuring justice for the victims. Today, the name Paul Bernardo is synonymous with the darkest chapters in Canadian criminal history. The trial serves as a haunting reminder of the capacity for evil which exists with some individuals and the importance of seeking justice for those whose lives were tragically cut short. While Paul Bernardo is still in prison, Karla served only 12 years. She has since changed her name, married her lawyer's brother, and has had 3 children of her own. Since she was never charged for any of the sexual offenses, she didn't even have to register on any sexual predator registries. I find that insane. I feel so horrible for these children. Now, my question is, what man in his right mind would hear this story and think, that's my type of woman? His right mind. Now, what do you think? Do you think this was a just sentencing? What should have been done differently if you ran the tables? I'll see you soon.